You mentioned that somebody in your family was involved in the show trial. Maybe you can explain.
Not really my close immediate family, but a very close aunt's brother-in-law was an old communist, an old member of the Communist Party way back from the 30s, and he was accused of espionage. And we heard it on the radio, the whole trial, the show trial, where he was confessing all the horrible things he did, which we knew he didn't. I mean, it was absolutely clear that everything was false.
Do you remember some of the things he was accused of?
It was involved with Standard Oil crisis, whatever it was. Okay, he was contacting Western businessmen and politicians, and it didn't really matter.
Right. But it was on the radio, and of course.
Oh, all the show trials were on. We didn't have television.
Yes.
It was on radio, and we were sitting in the living room listening to Zoltán Radu to confess all the horrible things that he did, and that really, I think that was one time when I realized myself that whatever I hear in school, it's not true. And from then on, no one had to tell me. Again, going back to 4 years earlier, when no one had to tell me that I'm not supposed to be Kati Gönci, but Kati Kish, no one had to tell me that whatever my family is talking about politics in the living room, I am not supposed to say that in school or not close friends, because there are consequences.
What happened?
By the way, Zoltán Radu was executed.
Even though he was forced to confess.
He was forced to.
He was tortured, or
I don't know. I think he was tortured.
Yeah.
Not really physical torture. There is psychological torture.
Or
they sleep.
Or you threaten their family.
And all that. So anyway, he was executed, and rehabilitated in 1956, before the revolution.
What do you mean by rehabilitated?
That the government acknowledged that it was a mistake what happened, and they made a great funeral for him.
Okay.
Okay. So, and right after these started that I went to school, and someone came crying that they are going to be relocated to a farm, to a village. And that had really no reason, except that someone liked their apartment, a communist
person in the
in high places, and living in Buda, they were beautiful houses on a hill of the Galiet mountain where I lived. So it happened quite often that that again, it was not very.
These relocations.
I want to mention one thing. First of all, while I was in the Zionist camp, Gabi heard about it, that people are going to Romania, orphan children going to Romania for the summer. Transylvania, which was Hungarian speaking, but belonging to Romania now. And of course, he wasn't selected because he wasn't an orphan. But he wanted to be with his friend, so he sneaked on the train. Sneaked up on the train, and without telling his parents, he went to Romania for almost a whole summer.
So how did they find out he was there?
Well, they must have heard about it, and they must have get some contact eventually, but that's very typical of your father.
Did he ever tell stories about that he liked it? I mean, that he got in trouble?
He sort of liked it. He wanted to be with his friend, and
Was he punished for sneaking away?
I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did, but he didn't really care about these things, okay?
Yeah.
But talking about relocations, the worst part of it was in 1950. Don't forget, this was the worst Stalin era in those days. And in 1950, because he wasn't from a good family, like wasn't a worker, proletariat, or a peasant, he wasn't allowed to go to university. So he was drafted to the army. And he was in the army for 3 years. And unfortunately, he took part a few times in these relocational ventures.
Of course, he had no choice.
Around that area in the country where they took people, rich peasants, and so on. I have to mention that very soon the Communist Party gained power. There was a very strong class society. The first class was the proletariat. If your father was a worker, that's what I mean by proletariat. The second place was the peasant, but not the rich peasant, the peasant. And the third was intellectual, which thanks for my father's doctorate, everybody thought he was a doctor. So I belonged to the intellectual class, which was definitely much better than the so-called other. That was really, we were told, it's shameful. It doesn't make sense, but that's the way it was.
Would Gabi's family have been in the other?
Yes. He was in the other.
Yeah,
because his grandfather had a scrapyard. He was a commercial.
Yeah.
It was a commercial family. Not my father-in-law, but he was also a manager in a factory.
A leather factory.
A leather factory, which was nationalized in 48, 49, and from then on he had very menial and terrible jobs. So that was my experience.
So let's go back to your schooling. Like you went to elementary school.
Elementary school was, as I told you, there were some problems, but other than that, I really truly have to say that I had a fairly happy childhood. I mean, I accepted that whatever I hear on the radio, in the newspaper, or whatever, I just have to
turn it on.
Completely ignore it. I was a pioneer, which is the youth movement for the communist kids.
Mm-hmm.
But
that was like being a scout.
No, and it was more political.
Okay.
Like I went to a summer camp with the pioneers where I had a lovely time. But every afternoon there was a seminar where we had to discuss the war in Korea. And that was in the 50s, yeah?
Hmm.
So that was the Korean War. And I remember distinctly that I was devastated that I am going to be asked my opinion and what. I didn't even know where Korea was.
Yeah.
Okay? And so it was more political than, let's say, a Boy Scout. But I took the good part of it. The summer camp, the fun with my friends, and so on.
Would Aniko have gone to these same camps?
Aniko is 4 years older, so she was already in the what is it called? In an older generational
Hmm.
communist group.
Whatever the name is.
Cosmopol in Russian, and I don't even remember what it was called, but it was the student association for the Communist Party.
Okay.
Okay?
Going back to school, you and Aniko missed many years of education.
Not really.
No?
No. Just the first year.
For you, but she must have missed a few.
The same.
Yeah?
That was the only year there was no school.
Okay.
That was the only year there was no school.
So that's easy to catch up then.
Yeah. Before the war, Aniko went to a English Hungarian school where she learned English and finished the first 4th grade.
Right.
And I went there in the last year as a kindergarten student.
Very young.
But in Hungary in those days, there were 4 years elementary and then 8 years of gymnasium, high school.
Right.
So she didn't go to first year high school, but then she went for the whole year until she finished.
And of course, then you all had to learn Russian.
Yeah. I can't speak one word of Russian. I learned it for 8 years.
But one of your classes was Russian.
Yes, it was. That was the language that we had to learn.
And I won't ask you to do it, but you can sing the Russian national
I
anthem.
can, yes.
Yeah, you're
but
so...
I spared. Actually, it's not the national anthem anymore.
No.
It had the melody is the same, but the words are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can think of that. So you then went to gymnasium.
I went to. By the time I went to school, they changed it to 8 years of elementary school and then 4 years high school. So I went to, in 1952, I had to go to the high school and Aniko had to start university. But being the wrong class, it was very iffy whether she will be accepted at the university. Fortunately, there was a mathematical competition countrywide, and she won. She was among the winners, let's put it this way.
So she
wasn't
clearly
the only
was
one.
very, very smart.
And so there was no way to refuse her the university entrance to the math. She entered as a math and physics teacher. Okay, winning the math contest, they couldn't say no.
Mm-hmm.
I got into the art high school where I applied. I have to say that I had some help from a distant relative who was very active in that. He was we used to call him a professional communist.
Which means?
and which means that he wasn't really a communist, but he was involved with. And he had some help that I was accepted in school, fortunately.
And so that was 4 years of school.
Yes.
And what did you study when you were there? What kind of art?
I studied everything that in a normal high school, except Latin. I didn't learn Latin.
I think Daddy did.
Yes. Aniko did, Agi did. I didn't learn Latin. And so I couldn't, I was told I couldn't go to medical school, but I had no plans anyhow. So what did I learn? I learned, of course, far more. First of all, the first 3 hours were art classes where we drew all kind of models and so on. And then we learned a little bit more art history than average high school students. And in those days in Hungary, the school was only in the morning till 1 o'clock. But my school, to make up for the art classes, we were in school till 3. So, but other than that, it was a regular.
But in terms
high
of art,
school.
did you learn techniques in painting, sculpture?
Not painting, no. I chose commercial graphic, lithography, because when I went to school, I wanted to be a costume and set designer. That was my real plan in life. But after 2 years, they stopped teaching it. I have no idea why, but it stopped. So I chose graphic design. I didn't imagine myself good enough for just to learn just art.
Mm.
And all my life, my mother told me that I have to have a profession that I can stand on my own. From her own experience, she learned that.
And it actually turned out to be true because it
is absolutely true. Yeah.
It was your career.
I was a very happy young girl. My teenage years were okay. As I mentioned before, politics sort of, we accepted that's the way life is. And nobody was rich, so I didn't feel I am missing too much. And we used to go to dances, school dances. That was the biggest entertainment. And also, the art was subsidized very strongly because they felt that it is important for people to get something out of life. And they realized that the Hungarians like their opera, their concert, and you can sort of satisfy them. And even though we were rather poor, even in Hungarian standard, my mother was able to buy season tickets for the opera, for the concert, and we had a lot of very nice experience that way.
Now, this whole time you had your grandfather living with you?
My grandfather lived with us.
And Ibi as well?
Ili,
sorry.
My aunt, who never married. After my grandmother died in 1948, she lived with us also. Now, in those days, it was very important to have as many people registered, because in Hungary you had to register where you live, not like here. As many as possible, because we had a huge apartment. And if we did not qualify, my mother and 2 daughters did not qualify for a 3 bedroom. Well, you would call it a 3 bedroom, and maid's room and all that. They would have put in someone to live with us. So it was quite important. Clary was also registered in our place because she spent their summer holidays with us. So those things were very important in those days. But my grandfather always lived with us.
But it also helped with the income in terms of.
Yes, because my uncle Tibor paid for his keep.
Okay.
Yeah. And was the way to help my mother.
And Ely, was she on a pension or was she working?
No, she was still working.
What did she do?
Working. She wasn't that old.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, she wasn't that old.
What did she do?
She was a bookkeeper.
Okay.
Bookkeeper. Retired very early, but she was working.
Yeah. We talked about Oniko going to university. Do you have any recollection of how that experience was for her? Because obviously she was an intellectual.
Well, Oniko being Oniko, she was always more emotional about these things. She was more, it bothered her more that we cannot say what we feel. At the university, no matter what you studied, you had to have your Marxist-Leninist seminar, and actually it was one of your courses.
Right.
Okay? It didn't go well with her too much. Not only that, she was very religious. And of course, the government, the party, was against religion. So she had more friction with these things.
I can see that.
So, but.
So it's not that long after you met Gobby.
Well, I met Gobby in 55.
In 55? Okay.
Yeah.
And you graduated from high school?
I graduated only in 56.
Okay.
Yeah. So but after Stalin died in 53, there was a little bit of ease of this terrible terror. And for a while, things were a little bit better, hopeful that things will get better, but it didn't last very long. Because when a dictatorial government realizes that if they ease things, people won't stop where they want.
The line keeps moving.
Then so they came down again. And
what do you remember about when Stalin died? Like how, I must have been a very, the whole city stopped.
I was in high school. Yeah, I actually have experience of that. We were in school when my Russian teacher came in crying and said that horrible news. And we pretended that we are very shocked and very sorry. And then the next class was history. We were learning something about Hungarian in the Middle Ages. Yeah, I don't know. Hungary has 1,000 years of history. So, and the teacher who was teaching history and also art history too came in and said, "Put away your books. Today I'm going to make a speech about great Alexander." Now, you have to understand that we learned in ancient history, the most famous thing was that after great Alexander died, the whole empire fell apart. Okay? This is something that even as a saying, Hungarians were saying. So it was a very, very meaningful statement. And then we had to line up and, march with the whole city was marching down to the Stalin statue, and the Requiem was playing, and all the jazz, and I wasn't crying. Afterwards, I wasn't crying.
Nothing to cry
And
about.
none of my friends were crying, but of course we were not very loud about it or anything. And as I said, it was a little bit better for a while. People who were in camps, concentration camps, or in prison were let go. Not everybody, but some. Those concentration camps, by the way, we didn't even know about. We only learned, I personally learned it only in Canada. The famous
The gulags.
concentration camp for the communists. So, and then once you start opening a country and give a little freedom, it starts leaking everywhere. And that's what happened in 55, and slowly it spread all around. All around, and of course then ended up with the revolution.
Mm-hmm. So you were in high school. I believe you stayed friends with some of, like you had friends in school, and
Yes,
I think you have communicated, over the years with some of them.
yes. Some of them stayed in Hungary. My best friend, my absolute best friend, stayed in Hungary,
What was her name?
Eva Haraszti.
Okay.
And Haraszti being, when you spell out Haraszti, the name, right away you know that it was a gentry class. And the whole family was a lovely family, and very, very nice to me. Very nice to me. I had also friends in high school. She was from elementary school, by the way. From high school, I have one who went to England.
That's the one I'm thinking.
She died just a few years ago, and we kept in correspondence. And then,
She came out in the revolution as well.
yes, she also came out the revolution. And then I had a few that stayed in Hungary, which I don't. I had a very good friend in my late elementary school years, as an early teenager, who was a very good friend of mine, and she was a very nice person. But every time I went to visit her, her mother looked out and said, "Aniko, the little Jew is here." So, but it didn't change the friendship. But it's a typical Hungarian thing, okay?
Absolutely.
So, I really don't think anything else